Hello, everyone. It's so great to have you all here. Thanks for joining Hone's webinar. Is your company ready for this performance review cycle? We'll find out together. A few quick notes. You may have heard me mention it, but just in case, live transcription is enabled for this webinar. If you need to use this feature, you can click on Show Captions at the bottom of your Zoom window at any time. And also, this webinar will be recorded and shared with everyone who is registered. So we'll have introductions momentarily. Our quick agenda: as our organizations prepare for a great performance review season, our colleagues from Textio have conducted some amazing research around performance management and will be sharing their findings with us. I will share some best practices for effective performance management from Hone, and then we will have Q&A with our amazing partner at Rover. It's lovely to be here and see you all. I'm Sabrina Creighton, and I will be your moderator today. I'm the Senior Director of Learning Design and Coach Community here at Hone. I've been in the L&D space for a little over 15 years and led training teams in healthcare and retail and risk management. Pretty varied. In my role at Hone, I lead our instructional design team as well as oversee our wonderful global community of coach facilitators. I have some friends here with me today, so I will pass it off to Jordana to introduce herself next.
Thanks, Sabrina. Hi, I'm Jordana Heller, and I am Director of Data Intelligence at Textio. My background is in language and data science. I've been working in machine learning for 15 plus years, and now I work for a company that uses that to identify bias in writing throughout the employee lifecycle. And at Textio, I lead the engineering and data science teams that are responsible for supporting our products with data and actionable insights throughout the customer lifecycle, all the way from our marketing to our product development, and to make sure our customers understand how our products are working for them.
Thanks so much. Welcome, Jordana. Peggy, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Peggy Marvin. I am the Director of HR Business Partnership and Learning and Development at Rover. I also serve on our Rover DEI committee, something I'm very passionate about, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. My background is primarily in HR business partnership. I'm going to say 15 plus years as well. And just a little bit about Rover, for those of you that don't know, we're the world's largest five-star pet network of pet sitters and dog walkers. And so our mission is to connect pet parents with loving pet care providers. We offer overnight services, boarding and home pet sitting, daytime services, doggy daycare, walking, and we have millions of pet parents who have booked our services in North America and Europe. So really excited to be here today.
Thanks so much, Peggy. Big fan of Rover and love teaching your classes and seeing all the amazing pets. All right, so let's kick it off. Jordana, I'm going to turn it over to you to share some amazing research from Textio.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's talk about closing the feedback gap. Is low quality feedback driving your team to quit? The answer is yes. That is a spoiler. So I want to talk today about some research that Textio did this year, looking specifically at the relationship between the quality of feedback that employees are getting and their likelihood to leave their current position. As you all know, it costs more to hire a new teammate than to invest in one you already have, and diverse teams work more effectively. So there are many reasons to invest in inclusive retention strategies. And we wanted to really understand specifically about the effect of feedback quality on employee retention and diversity. So we did this in a couple of different ways. First, we conducted a survey, and then we looked directly at the relationship between some feedback text and retention at a large corporation. So I'll be talking about results from both of those investigations as we go forward. And again, spoiler, feedback quality is disproportionately not so great for women and people of color, and disproportionately affects their likelihood to leave an organization. First, in our survey, we wanted to understand, are people receiving quality feedback at work? Are some demographic groups receiving higher quality feedback than others? Do people plan to stay in their organization? Are some demographic groups more likely to leave? And then how does feedback quality relate to that? And so we wanted to start with a baseline. And we found that in our survey, when we asked the questions, do you expect to leave your organization in the next 12 months, or have you interviewed for a role outside of your current organization in the past 12 months? 38% of employees were planning to leave. So that's pretty high, higher than we'd like. So that's the baseline we're starting from. And then our question was, how does feedback affect that? And we found that when we asked about people's experiences, in particular, when we asked how clear employees felt on their development areas, and specifically where they were clear on what they would need to do next to earn their next promotion, we found that if people were unclear and receiving low quality feedback and unclear on what to do to make it to the next promotion, they were 63% more likely to leave than that 38% baseline, which is a significant increase. So when we break that down, we find that when we just look on the left at people who are planning to stay with their current employer, about 61% of those people understand their manager expectations of what they would need to do to improve in their role. And as opposed to of people who are planning to leave their current employer within a year, only about 21% understand manager expectations. So there's a real disparity in the feedback that's getting to them and their understanding of what they need to do to move forward, and it's affecting their likelihood to leave. And we find that the feedback quality is also not equitable across demographic groups. So there's a gender disparity where for men, about 83% understand what's required to get to the next promotion, whereas for women, non-binary people, transgender people, and gender non-conforming people, only about 71% understand what's required for the next promotion. And we also see disparities in racial demographics. So we looked at, this just shows white people on the left and Asian people on the right. We looked at many different racial groups, but these were the sort of ends of the spectrum where white people felt the most informed about what they needed to do to earn the next promotion at about 80, which still isn't 100%. And Asian people reported only feeling that they understood what was required to earn the next promotion about 54% of the time. So there's quite a bit of range here. Not only are people not getting the feedback that they need, there's a inequitability across demographic groups as well. So now I wanted to jump into a little bit of a deeper dive into what makes feedback high quality and how that affects retention. So I mentioned that we did a survey. I just shared some of the survey results with you. And then we also did an analysis of feedback, text, and retention at a large international enterprise organization with a variety of roles. So this was more than 13,000 employees across 2 annual review cycles. And we looked specifically about how different aspects of feedback quality in the text itself was associated with likelihood of retention. And one of the things that we wanted to look at was unactionable feedback. So what is unactionable feedback? So actionable feedback includes specific examples of what went well or poorly in an employee's past performance and outlines specific opportunities for growth. So for example, if you say you interrupt people in meetings, that's a piece of feedback. But what would be more actionable is if you added examples tied to outcomes and then suggested an alternate behavior. So what we're looking for is not just the feedback, but those specific examples and those alternative behavior suggestions. And we find that at this organization, Black employees are 26% more likely to receive unactionable feedback. And that's actually despite only receiving 79% as much feedback overall. So they're getting less feedback and more of the feedback is unactionable. That makes it really hard for them to understand what they need to do next in their role in order to grow and advance. And these effects compound. And what is the effect of unactionable feedback? Well, we also see that people who receive unactionable feedback are more likely to leave their organization. This is actually across all demographics, controlling for things like performance review rating, tenure, job level, gender, and race and ethnicity. But these folks who are receiving this feedback are 11% more likely to leave. And as you saw on the last slide, this is disproportionately affecting Black employees. Another factor contributing to feedback quality that we wanted to investigate was directness and clarity. So managers often struggle to provide feedback clearly and directly. Maybe they're trying to avoid conflict and shying away from providing direct feedback, especially when the feedback is critical in nature. So you can think of these sort of softening terms, we call them hedging terms. Here are some examples from the data set that we had. I think, a bit, generally, probably. These are not terms that are necessary for providing your feedback. They're softening the feedback. And they're used quite commonly. And we actually find that shying away from giving direct feedback causes employees to leave. We found that people who are getting performance reviews containing, I think, hedging statements were actually 29% more likely to leave their company within the next year than everybody else. So this was just a sampling of the findings that we have in our report. I would encourage you to read more of the report. It's free on Textio's website. But in sum, for what we've talked about here, feedback quality does drive employee retention and attrition. People who are not receiving actionable or direct feedback are significantly more likely to leave their roles. And women of all races and people of color of all genders are the most likely to get low quality feedback, either in the feedback that they qualitatively experience that we can survey them about, or in the feedback that we can actually measure when we go look at the text. And so we know that to improve employee retention, especially among these marginalized groups, we have to commit to and invest in systems that help managers give direct and actionable feedback. So I'm excited to hear more from Hone about their recommendations there.
Thanks so much, Jordana. I am super excited. I've read it to some extent, but I can't wait to dive deeper into Textio's report and to identify how I, as a leader, and how our organization can really consider everything in your research in our performance review processes. So thank you so much for sharing that. Can't wait to hear more from you in a little bit. All of the data you just shared too really highlights how important equitable, high quality, actionable feedback are and the impact that it has on our teams when we don't have it. I love where you said examples tied to outcomes. That definitely is something that's sticking with me. So that's excellent context for what should be foundational to best practices for giving performance feedback. So let's talk about that. So in many organizations, it can certainly feel that performance management has these standalone processes that happen at mid-year or at end of year, where there's this crunch to create this documentation and produce this output that is someone's performance review. But really, ideally, this is a culmination of events that happen every day. Performance management is a continuous process. From planning management and outlining a strategy for the goals of the performance review cycle, to identifying what the objectives and goals will be, to then actually developing that performance. The most time is spent here. If we think about the 1 or sometimes 2 performance cycles that organizations have each year, those process cycles being the time that we have to write the documentation and submit ratings to our HR or our people operations, maybe they cumulatively cover maybe 1 to 3 months total out of the year. The rest of the year, we are ideally developing that performance. In our regular one-on-ones, where we're coaching team members toward professional organizational goals, where we're giving them feedback consistently that's equitable, high quality, and actionable. So that then when the official processes start up and we're called on to actually evaluate performance, we have the data to do informal work reviews. We have the data to write formal performance reviews. So now when we complete those organizational processes, we get to reward through performance from public recognition or through growth opportunities or through compensation. So taking all of that into consideration, how do we channel the work that we're doing with team members across the entire year into a great performance review experience? It comes down to 4 things: being observant and giving feedback regularly. Performance evaluation should not have surprises or things that someone has not heard yet. Making your evaluation accurate by gathering all of the relevant information. You can do this through your one-on-ones, through the coaching and feedbacking that you're doing throughout the year. Make sure your evaluation is fair by avoiding biases. Be wary if your overall positive or negative impression of a team member influences your evaluation of their work, or if you're only focusing on recent events versus the whole review period, or even biases that can occur when we favor team members who are similar to us. Lastly, help your direct reports focus on the future. The performance review is always focusing on past performance. So how can you and your direct work together to forge a path forward toward what goals they will make next, or how they'll grow further? What's the next version of their work going to be? And often this can be the best part of the review for someone. So here at Hone, we recommend a 4-step model. This is the SBIW model. The first 3 steps pull from the Center for Creative Leadership's SBI model, and then we added a 4th step, the way forward, which focuses on checking in, 2-way communication, putting feedback into action. This is a fantastic model that can be used for feedback in the performance cycle, also feedback to peers, colleagues, your own manager, really anyone, but particularly when we're focusing on creating a great performance review process. The SBIW model helps us to deliver consistent and objective feedback. And this model can be used for both positive and constructive feedback. So let's look at that a little bit deeper. The first 2 components of the model are situation and behavior. This is where we objectively share what was observed. And here we want to avoid things like generalization. So you'll want to avoid using terms like never or always. You'd also want to avoid comments that seem to describe how the team member is as a person. We want to focus on what has been observed throughout the performance review period. What happened? Where did it happen? And we want to be careful to describe actual observable behavior. This helps us stay away from things that could be subjective or things that are up to our interpretation. So an example for this, for a performance review, could be something like, throughout this year, I've observed you gaining buy-in from various levels of management and positively influencing situations without official authority. Being able to outline these situations is critical to the performance review process. So capturing this feedback throughout the year is really important. When it comes to impact, this is where we describe the results of the behavior on the team, business, or you. This component can help the recipient understand why the feedback is important enough to be included in their performance review. So an example of this could be, it's important to include this feedback because this is critical to your ongoing professional development in this area. Arguably, one of the best parts of the SBIW model, and my personal favorite, is the W, the way forward. So up to now, we've outlined situations and behaviors that we've observed, and we've described the impact they've had on their team or organization. The way forward is an opportunity to holistically discuss the review and how your feedback landed. You might ask, what are your thoughts? Or is there anything you disagree with? Asking questions invites the recipient into the conversation and into that 2-way dialogue. My very favorite question here is, what are your thoughts? Because you get to hear a lot from your direct or the person you're giving the feedback to. The key here is to be open and curious. And from here, we can identify where we go next. What plans will we establish? What goals will we set? How will the team member address opportunities for improvement or continue their trajectory of growth? This is an impactful growth and feedback opportunity all wrapped up in an easy to use framework. I use it every day. It's definitely helped me to give actionable, relevant, timely, and consistent feedback. So the SBIW model is a great tool for performance reviews. It helps in providing clarity and specificity so that feedback is more actionable, more understandable. It also promotes consistency in feedback when this model is used throughout your teams or throughout your organization. It focuses on objective feedback rather than judgments or interpretations, so it helps to reduce the risk of bias. It can also improve communication by offering a structured framework for discussing performance. Sometimes feedback makes people nervous or anxious, or they're not sure what they're going to say in the moment. So having a framework really helps for leaders to be able to share feedback in a way that is clear and understandable by the person that's receiving the feedback. So how can Hone and Textio help you with performance management? Let me share some more about how Hone can help you, and then we're going to hear from Jordana again. So essentially, Hone was really founded on the idea of power skills at scale. And we wanted to train managers, directors, VPs, frontline individual contributors, high potential team members with these incredible skills. We wanted to do that in a science-backed way and in a collaborative learning environment that was engaging, but still really easy to scale and measure impact. And we've deployed that successfully with many companies over the years. Our catalog is the world's largest when it comes to live, online, short, high-impact classes for power skills. We have over 100 skills covered between management, leadership, teamwork, coaching across our catalog. And I'm really fortunate to lead our learning design team. We are also fortunate to have an amazing international group of coaches that spans 9 countries. Hone coaches are expert facilitators. We hire facilitators who have coaching, leadership, and virtual facilitation experience. Hone coaches are former and often current senior leaders in organizations, and they're also educators and certified coaches. They all operate their individual coaching practices and consultancies, and so they're able to reach a broader audience through facilitating classes at Hone. And they do that all in an exceptional level and in their own unique ways. Hone coaches bring their diverse backgrounds and unique experiences to every class. It's not just a class with a deck and a facilitator, it is an immersive learning experience. So I'm also happy to lead our coach community. We have been so proud at Hone to have worked with over 300 customers at this point as their flagship training partners, for things like core manager training, Manager 201, senior leadership training, diversity, equity, and inclusion training, individual contributor training. We actually just recently crossed the 30,000 learners mark, and you'll see on our website that we've now trained for over 100,000 hours over this last few years. We're really proud of the scale that we've been able to deliver, and that's really our vision to reach more and more people with our really incredible power skills catalog. So we've actually had a membership product since 2020 that would typically be deployed alongside our traditional private programs, which are cohort-based experiences targeted at certain audiences. And we would add in membership as an extra continuous learning experience on the back end. Hone's membership takes Hone's catalog of live online courses, and then it runs them on a monthly recurring basis. So learners can choose which classes they take and when. So that means that they can choose a personalized set of topics for their needs, and it also means that they can choose a convenient time, which really helps with engagement. And that's been the experience largely for the last 3 years. But what we realized was for the times we're in and for the achievement of our mission, we wanted to really invest in our membership product. And so that culminated in the launch of a new membership model a couple of weeks ago. The big difference for membership in 2023 versus 2020 is that you can create programs and see impact results in a way you haven't been able to do previously. We've typically run programs or the collection of classes that learners go through as a cohort experience. But now in the new membership, you can assign people a set of classes as a program to be taken via membership classes. So it was a really fast way for learning leaders to launch programs. Your learners register and attend the class days and times that work for them. So we're really trying to meet the moment and the needs that we've heard from our customers with this product. That's a lot about Hone. Let's hear from Jordana. Jordana, you're up.
Thanks, Sabrina. Yeah, so Textio creates software that helps companies hire and retain a diverse team by interrupting bias in real time as people are waiting. Our purpose-built AI platform includes Textio Loop for inclusive recruiting and Textio Lift for fair performance feedback, both of which analyze over 1 billion documents every year. We're also proud of Textio U, our learning hub, which certifies thousands of people every year on inclusive language practices. Among Textio's own leadership team, which is everybody who's VP or C-suite, 9 out of 11 identify as women and 5 out of 11 identify as people of color. We really think that in order to build inclusive advice-giving products that we need to walk the walk ourselves. Quickly on Textio Lift, when we're talking about supporting managers giving great feedback, we find when we look across feedback that we've seen that managers struggle. 52% of managers are giving employees feedback on their personality, which is not relevant to their performance, or don't provide enough suggestions, or don't use clear examples, or use harmful or offensive language. So we built a product to help managers interrupt all those things in real time. We can move forward. This little screenshot shows an example. So as you're writing your feedback, Textio pops up with advice on how to make your feedback more direct, actionable, clear, relevant, and concise, and helps give you suggestions on things to say instead of personality feedback or things to add if you need to add something in order to make the feedback more actionable. Another feature of the product is being able to understand how equitably quality feedback is being given across demographic groups in your company. This is really important in order to hold yourselves and your managers accountable to giving equitable and high quality feedback. And similarly, we've been really proud to have been named to Fast Company's World's Most Innovative Companies list several times, Forbes AI 50, CNBC Disruptor 50, and a third of Fortune 1000 companies like Bloomberg, Cisco, Hulu, Oracle, Spotify, and Warner Music Group are trusting us to bring inclusivity to their language by interrupting bias across their job descriptions, performance feedback, and other workplace communications. That's it. Thank you.
That's amazing, Jordana. Thanks so much for sharing all of that with us. That's amazing. I really think that's an amazing tool to incorporate. And I love seeing the suggestions on the slide. Would love to see more about that. All right, thanks so much. So let's get into a little Q&A with Rover and bring Peggy into the conversation with Jordana and myself. I'm going to stop sharing my slides so that we can get into this. As a reminder, if you have any questions for our panel from Hone, Textio, and Rover, please feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. So I'd love to get this started with a question for you, Jordana. Are you ready for this? You mentioned it a few times, the idea of high quality and low quality performance feedback. How do you define high quality versus low quality performance feedback?
That is a great question. So in short, you covered a lot of it, I think, in your piece as well. But in short, high quality feedback gives your teammates the information they need to grow in their roles. And we can assess this in a number of different ways. So in our survey, we asked people whether they were getting the feedback they needed in order to understand how to improve. Did they feel like that? But we also know that we can identify aspects of the language used to give feedback that are indicators of quality. Textio's Lift software gives writers feedback in a number of areas. I mentioned the broad areas of direct, actionable, clear, relevant, and concise. This includes a bunch of different types of feedback. Add examples in growth areas, or avoid giving feedback on personality. Espouse a growth mindset over a fixed mindset. And you mentioned not using generalizations like never and always. Those are important too. So there are a lot of different ways to define this, but I will add, one of the things you said really resonated with me, that a holistic approach really involves creating a system in which high quality feedback is given regularly and not just once a year. People need to know what to do to get to that next place, and they need to be working on that continuously in order to grow effectively.
Yeah, really great point, Jordana. Thanks so much for sharing that. Pulling from some other information and research that you shared earlier, could you shed some light on maybe what factors might be contributing to marginalized groups receiving lower quality feedback? And also, what are some practical steps or recommendations that organizations can take to address the inequity of feedback?
Yeah, this is a tough one. People are biased. Everybody is biased, and we need to bring those biases to the discussion table and address them, really examine them. You mentioned that people can be biased to people who are similar to them, but also people can be biased to just broader cultural biases. We've seen many examples where women give other women harsher feedback because of societal biases that are making it into people's personal biases, which is natural and common, but we don't want to perpetrate it. So, what can we do is a great question. So, education is really important in that bringing biases to the forefront and examining them. And also, we think real-time interruption is a really important tool. You can learn a lot, but you sometimes need a buddy to say, "Hey, wait a minute, did you really want to say that thing?"
Right.
Let's examine that a little bit closer. And I think at the organizational level, a really important thing is setting accountabilities for your managers and having them form ongoing relationships with the HR professionals in your organization. Give them goals in that they should be meeting in terms of their feedback quality and feedback equitability, and hold them accountable and give them the tools that they need in order to succeed.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. I love that idea of a buddy. That you know, and a kind of a accountability buddy that checks and ensures that there's not that bias represented. Really great tools there. Thank you, Jordana.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And a question for you. So how do you think we should be ensuring that our leaders are prepared for the annual review cycle? What are some actions that you suggest taking throughout the year to ensure that performance is recognized and documented to avoid that moment of surprise in the actual review conversation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a few things. I think it's very important to have clearly communicated performance review cycle timelines, et cetera. Because when leaders don't have a clear cycle or they don't have enough time to allocate to performance review, you can really see that affecting the quality of performance reviews. If they feel like they have to rush to write them, or if they happen at inopportune times where they haven't been able to plan for them. Also, it's really important to ensure that leaders have training on how to do performance reviews and how to ensure that the feedback is equitable. Hone offers a varied amount of classes that can help leaders to prepare for performance reviews, write actionable, relevant performance documentation, and then also how do they hold those one-on-one meetings to make sure that entire cycle is valuable to that employee. And also, I think a great question that you asked about how leaders can be working on this throughout the year. One-on-ones, having them consistently is so important. And as leaders, we know that we're busy. There are a lot of things that can take our time, but when we can find a way to have consistent one-on-ones with people, that allows us to be consistently looking at their work, to consistently provide them with feedback, to consistently use that SBIW model. Another happy side effect, you mentioned all of the different statistics showing why employees stay and why they leave. Having a consistent one-on-one with your manager is a place to grow relationships, to share wins and frustrations, to get that feedback, and then to also just feel like you have a space to be heard. So in our Leading Highly Effective One-on-Ones class at Hone, we provide an amazing framework for how to do that. And so if you think of consistently doing that throughout the year, you now have a record of all of the feedback that you've given as a leader. And you're able to refer back to that when it comes time to write a performance review. None of us are going to remember everything that happened with all of our directs. So documenting that and actually having those consistent one-on-ones is key to that, to making that performance review cycle really impactful. Yeah, that was a really great question. Thank you so much for asking it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to bring Peggy in on this. Peggy, can you please tell us a bit about how Rover approaches their performance management and giving feedback? Who's giving feedback to whom and how that happens?
Yeah, thank you. And it's been great to learn from both of you over the last half an hour or so. So I'm taking a lot of notes to incorporate into what we do at Rover. But I think as you've already illustrated, Sabrina, Rover thinks about performance management as a continuous process. And I think that's so important and something that we've really tried to build over time. It starts with our company strategy, and then each organization does strategic planning to support the company strategy. We're in that process right now of doing that for 2024. And then we really do approach goal setting with quarterly OKRs, and we make them SMART so that they are measurable and actionable as well. For most of our roles, some of our roles are metrics based as well, so people understand what success looks like. And then I think it's so important for each employee to know how their direct daily work supports the growth and success of the business. So I know how I'm coming to work every day and I'm adding value to the business, and that my work matters. And then it is a common practice. We were just talking about highly effective one-on-ones. It is a common practice at Rover for our managers to have weekly one-on-ones or biweekly one-on-ones with each member of their team. And that includes that ongoing time-based coaching and feedback. So we really do encourage that and train on that with Hone as our Manager 101 series, so that people have that foundational before they're a new manager as they're career pathing, and then once they are a new manager. And then we do a formal annual review process, and that's in Q1 every year. We also do what we call mid-year check-ins. So it's less formal, but it is a time to sit down and have that feedback conversation as well that is documented to measure success for the first half of the year. And then the rewards piece, our comp philosophy is pay for performance. So it is tied to an employee's impact to the business. And then to your question about who's giving feedback to whom, we do encourage feedback across our organization all of the time, but specifically as part of our annual review process. Employees do self-assessments. I think that's pretty common. We also do peer feedback as part of our annual review process, where each employee selects, we recommend around 3 peers that they work with closely, whether that's on their immediate team or cross-functionally. And that is approved by their leader so that the manager is getting feedback specifically from peers on who they work with closely and how they work together. And then employees also assess their managers as part of our annual review process. And so I assess my manager, it goes to her manager, and so on throughout our organization. So our managers are getting feedback on their performance as a leader as well. And then, of course, all of that is taken into consideration for managers to do the performance review for each of their employee.
That sounds like a really holistic take, and I like it. I'm wondering if you would be willing to share any areas where you're trying to encourage your managers to improve throughout the process.
Yeah, many areas come to mind. I think we're always learning and growing. And as we are starting to prepare for our annual review process in Q1, I think these are really top of mind for me as well. I think the first one is we always really do strive to have as much consistency as possible in our approach and application of performance ratings and promotion criteria. We accomplish this, I think, like many companies, through calibrations. We do real-time training for employees on giving feedback, all employee briefings early in the year, and then with managers specifically on what is a calibration, how do you prepare for calibrations, ensuring that our rating system and definitions are clear, that they're applied as consistently as possible, which is difficult because we're humans and we interpret things, and then how to think about differentiation of performance. And so we go through that with different trainings. We go through examples, case studies for managers where they're talking about what would I rate somebody on this with a group of their peers. So we're talking about it holistically together, and that we can talk through those recommendations and align on the best way to assess performance. So I would say that's the first thing. A couple other things. We also do really talk through giving effective, the high quality feedback and what that looks like. We use the SBIW model at Rover. We like to call it SBIWoof because we're Rover and we like to use dog language. But what is that? Including that feedback should be objective and actionable. So again, those examples of we try to do what low quality and high quality feedback looks like to show the differences for our managers, illustrating those for them. We also like to talk about what we call watch outs. So like personality-based feedback is a watch out that we talk about. Performance attribution is a watch out that we talk about, meaning distinguishing an individual's performance versus team performance and their contributions. And we also talk about what critical but not constructive feedback looks like. So we really try to illustrate some of these so that managers can recognize them as they're thinking about performance and planning that feedback. And then the last thing I want to add is that we do ensure that bias is top of mind. It is really common for us at Rover to talk about bias and how it influences many of our people practices. And that does include our annual review process and our mid-years, as well as many other things that we do, like recruiting and hiring and training on those things. But we specifically try to tailor it, the training we do on bias, about how it shows up in assessing performance and giving feedback as part of the performance review, so people can recognize it real time and try to interrupt it as much as possible. One of the things that we talk about a lot with bias is cultural values. That's a big part of our managing bias training, and that how that might influence feedback. So one example of that might be ensuring that whether it's an employee, a peer giving feedback, or a manager giving feedback, or considering whether a behavior is critical to someone's performance, or if it's merely a preference that manager or peer has. Is it really conforming to what you want or your preference, or is it is equally as effective but different than your own? So trying to really understand and avoid that similarity or affinity bias. So that's just one example of what we try to talk about as part of those trainings.
Wow, Peggy, you're doing so many good things at Rover. I love the SBIWoof reference. I'd love to hear. We know you've been a customer of home for some time. We know you've been through our classes, and I'd love to hear from you. What feedback have you received from your employees and managers, or what outcomes have you seen as a result of leveraging the SBIWoof feedback model with your workforce?
Yeah, I would say that the feedback that we receive constantly, which I think will ring true for all of us, and I definitely can relate to it, is that feedback is hard. It's hard to give feedback. It's hard to give especially difficult feedback or constructive feedback. We don't want to disappoint people or tell them bad news. And so people avoid it, I think, and it's a constant. It's not something that we can just get good at and then be good at. I think it's constantly something that we're working on. Specifically at Rover, one of our values is devotion to each other as people. And I think sometimes I've seen managers and employees misinterpret this value by giving someone what they consider the benefit of the doubt by not providing feedback, and saying, oh, they were having a bad day, I'm not going to give them that feedback. But the core of this value really is we're driven by seeing our people succeed and grow. And to grow requires that high quality feedback that I think we all desire and want, so that we can improve and understand our impact. So we really do try to shift that narrative that if there is a negative impact with something that happened before, the behavior is ongoing, it's a pattern, it really is important to address that in full alignment with that value, devotion to each other as people. We want to respect our colleagues, respect our team members by having the hard conversation in support of their growth. So I've often seen time and again where managers believe they've given constructive feedback to employees and actionable feedback. And then maybe that's part of coaching, feedback that's ongoing. And then if the behavior isn't improving and it becomes more of a formal conversation, I've heard an employee say, "Why haven't you told me this before?" And a manager is really surprised and said, in the moment, they don't understand because they feel like they've given this feedback, but it's because the feedback wasn't high quality, because they were using generalizations, because maybe they were hedging a little bit. And I think that when managers really do try to adopt, or peers really do try to adopt that SBIW model, they've seen that shift and they have more confidence that their feedback is clear and the receiver understands it, has internalized it, and can action it.
As you're going into this coming review cycle, are there one or two things that you're focused on doing differently based on learnings from your past review cycles?
Yeah, I think we've done a decent job in the past of introducing some of the things that I've talked about, the SBIW model, giving clear examples, we know what it looks like, the differences between low and high quality, biased language, clear and actionable. I think as I reflect on what we've done in the past and as we're preparing, what I'd like to do differently is really provide opportunities for managers to practice with one another. We do that as part of our ongoing training and development with Hone, but real time in the moment as part of the annual review, I want to carve out time as part of our trainings to have them maybe have that peer buddy that we talked about earlier and say, let me practice having this. Maybe it's the constructive or difficult, actionable feedback that's in a safe space, and their peer can give them that feedback on, hey, maybe I think you should do it differently, or the language you're using isn't quite effective, or let's go back to this, so that when they do go into that moment, they feel that much more prepared. So I think that's something that I've been thinking about that I'd like to add in this year.
Sounds like a great experiment.
Love that, Peggy. And for you both, we have a great question in the Q&A. It says, what are some resources that you recommend for individuals who go from IC to team lead regarding how to provide strong people development impact on their new teams? I'll add my 2 cents in here and then would love to pass it off to my colleagues. It's really hard to go from being an IC to a team lead. Anybody who's a team lead now has done it. It's really hard. And so in my opinion, in my experience, in order to really be able to have that strong people development impact, it's about practicing the foundations. It is about ensuring that when you become a team lead, you are building high trusting relationships so that you can get to know the people on your team, so that you understand what it is that they need, so that you understand what their goals are, whether or not they feel safe to fail at work, all of those different things. And that's going to be foundational to anything that you do as a leader. Being able to coach them, being able to provide feedback, perhaps through an SBIW model, and having those consistent one-on-ones where you are getting to know people and their development needs and what they do great and where they can improve. All of that is foundational to being able to have a great impact on people's development. It means a lot to them. So understanding who they are as an employee in your organization is highly important. That is my top advice for anybody becoming a team lead. Know who your people are and how you can support them. So I'll pass it. Jordana, Peggy, what would you like to add there?
I love that. Know your people. I think listening is so important. Getting to know what types of feedback really resonate with each individual. How do they like feedback? When do they like feedback? And learning how to communicate with them personally is really important. And I think also as we all know, one of the most difficult things about becoming a team lead from being an IC is letting go of the how of the work and focusing on the outcomes. and working with your team on how are they going to meet the outcomes that are your mutual goal, and letting them try their own things and coaching them through those things. I work in R&D in engineering and data science, and there's also a website called Lead Dev, which is really focused on growing engineers into leaders. So I would recommend checking that out as a specific resource if you have folks in the engineering area. Peggy, what about you?
I'm writing down lead dev because I definitely want to check that out for our tech teams. I would just say +1 to everything that you both said. One of the things that we do at Rover, we have a program called Aspiring Managers where, as part of our career development conversations, employees who want a career path to people managers, they talk about that with their managers and why they want to do that and what those roles look like. And then we have a nomination-based program every year to train aspiring managers on those foundations. And we leverage Hone and all of the classes that Sabrina talked about, those foundations about highly effective one-on-ones. And I don't have the list in front of me of the series that we go through, but we go through 4 classes and some practice labs for our aspiring managers so that they can get that training and practice with their peers who are aspiring managers as well to get those foundations before they become a manager. And I think that gives them more insight too on what is the role of a people manager and how is it different than my individual contributor role. Just because I'm a very strong individual contributor in a certain area or domain doesn't mean that I'm going to be a good people manager. It's a shift in mindset. And it is a very fundamentally different role. And so we want people to be set up for success and understanding what that is. And we want them to be passionate about that and to be set up for success in terms of having those foundations before they get into that role.
Love that, Peggy, and love the shout out to the coach approach and build high trust relationships, give feedback that lands, and lead highly effective one-on-ones. You can tell they're some of my favorite things.
Yeah, those are the 4 that we do in our Aspiring Manager series.
Yes, and we love seeing you there. Final question as we get ready to wrap up, colleagues. What advice do you have for other HR and L&D leaders when it comes to training their people on how to give feedback?
I can start. I think we started to talk about, I could talk about this for probably 15 minutes, but I'll try to be concise given the time. If I were to call out one thing, and I think that Jordana, you started to talk about it, I think it really does first start with ensuring that each manager is creating an environment of psychological safety for every employee, consistently building inclusive team cultures. I think statistically, correct me if I'm wrong, the number one reason why somebody stays or leaves at their job is their relationship with their manager. And so as a manager, having that vulnerability, sharing who you are, really getting to know your employees, really caring about who they are as a person, understanding what they care about and their style, and just building those authentic relationships where they know that you have their best interest at heart, I think is the foundation. So that when you go to give feedback, they trust you, they trust your point of view, they're going to be more likely to listen and action what you have to say, and they know that it comes from a place where they want you to grow and develop and succeed. And so for me, I think that's just number 1 at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. And I think at an organizational level, and I started to say this before too, I think one thing that we should not be afraid of is setting accountabilities, and really as part when we're evaluating our manager's performance, having that psychological safety be part of their review criteria. Whatever it is that you want to espouse, the culture that you want to espouse in your organization, set goals around it and hold your managers accountable, because this is really important work and it can seem sometimes secondary to get the product out the door, but it's not. It's really foundational. It's required in order to efficiently get the product out the door. If you encode your values in your evaluation system, then people are going to be more likely to follow through on it. It can be really powerful.
I will let us drop the mic on that, Jordana. That was so amazing. It has been so much fun and so insightful having this conversation with you both. Thank you so much from all you have shared from Textio and from Rover. I wish we had another hour. Hope to see you both again and excited for this year's performance review cycle. I hope everybody out there is too. So thanks everybody for joining. The recording will be sent to all of our registrants, and we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for joining Hone and Textio and Rover for this hour around performance.